Welcome to the life and times of backyard chickens. Wanted to show these commercials just to show you how endearing chickens can be, and to kind of show you, introduce you to their plight. But mainly what we're here for is all right. So we want to go over the craze that is backyard chickens, and all of the issues that we face as regulators with this craze. Recently, Boulder City and Henderson adopted new chicken ordinances, and so we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about what is this national trend, because I believe that's what it is. Talk about some of the typical regulations that you see nationwide, and what some of the typical prohibitions are for raising backyard chickens. Then we'll go over the ordinances that we came up with, as well as some kind of results or stories as we're trying to implement and enforce these ordinances. And then we'll have some final thoughts. We may have some special guests at the end. So I don't know if you want to talk about just how we came up with how we determined that we needed chicken ordinances.
Well, Boulder City is kind of rural, especially compared to the valley. We did allow chickens and where we allow horses, which is, if you're familiar with Boulder, it's the B Hill area. And I learned it was called B Hill because there used to be a giant letter B on it. I used to thought they named A Hill, B Hill, C Hill, D Hill, because there's so imaginative with the names. For example, the mountain that has all the antenna equipment on the top, they named that one Red Mountain. So what do you think they named the mountain next to it that's black? It's called Black Mountain. So you can see my thought, oh, maybe there was an A Hill and a B Hill and a C Hill. But the B Hill area is where they allow horses, and some people had chickens. But most of our the urbanite people, the ones who live in the normal-sized lots and houses, we had a young lady who came in who really wanted to raise chickens in her backyard. I asked her if she was daft. I grew up on a small farm. We had chickens. My job was to take care of those stupid chickens. I hate chickens. I was so stupid that for a summer job in high school, I worked at a chicken farm to clean out the chicken coops, those giant long ones where they bring them in as pelts and then take them out as fryers, and someone has to go in and clean out all the poop and the dead chickens. That was me. I decided to go to college after that. So I asked, did she really want to raise chickens and have fresh eggs? And again, I asked her, you know, it's cheaper to buy fresh eggs to the grocery store than after putting all the money into the chickens. She goes, no, we want to raise chickens. So she petitioned city council, went back and forth several times, and we got chickens.
Right. Well, also in Henderson, the way our ordinance used to read was you could have chickens ancillary to raising or keeping horses or cows once we had a cow ordinance. But that was only in acre and half acre lots, so there was definitely no room for this suburban backyard chicken movement. And we started to receive complaints about people calling up and their neighbors had chickens. And it's noisy. They've got chickens, they're not supposed to have chickens. So once we started researching, and it was about that time that Boulder City called us and asked what our chicken regulations were, and we discovered kind of we discovered a loophole that we didn't know existed until we started researching for Boulder City, where there was just a miscommunication between our city attorney's office and our animal control department and community development, where all of our chicken regulations had been in the animal control ordinance, and they got wiped out because animal control was removing a bunch of their animal regulations. I don't know why, but they did. So we had this big loophole where they were basically allowed in every single residential district unchecked. And we started getting more complaints, and we realized we needed some kind of regulations. So we had both researched other ordinances across the country just to get some ideas, and really discovered this is a thing. This is something that people enjoy doing, and it's not going away. It's getting bigger. So both of us really wanted to be open to that trend and be on the forefront. As we're going through our comprehensive plan update and our new comprehensive plan, basically, we really are thinking about food sources and just want to be in the front of this this trend, this urban agricultural trend. So just to explain what that national trend is, it's definitely part of the urban agriculture movement that is all the rage now. It's mainly for having fresh eggs. Some people keep them as pets, some people and especially out west or in the southwest, people grew up with chickens in their backyards, but so it's kind of a romantic, nostalgic type of thing, but it's mainly driven by the want for fresh eggs. And this is from a report that City of San Diego did. They really are, they're better eggs. They've got more vitamin E, more vitamin A, they have more beta-carotene. And as you can see, a hen lays about 5 to 6 eggs per week. So if you had a coop of, I think it was like 5 or 6, you'd have like 30 eggs a week. So it can be very not nutritive, but you have a lot of eggs. And there's other benefits to them. They eat bugs, and you can use their droppings for fertilizer.
Although, word of caution, if you've ever put fresh chicken manure on your garden, 1 or 2 things is going to happen. You're not going to harvest anything that year because everything's dead. Or you got lucky and got the manure that was sitting out for a while, and then you're going to have more zucchini than you know what to do with. Chicken manure is hot, and often people who think they're farmers and know chickens, they think they're going to use the manure for their yardscape. It's good to give them a heads up that it's still better to go to Lowe's and Home Depot and buy some other fertilizer that's been rested for a bit. Chicken manure, the term hot, it's going to burn everything up. So just as people come in, give them that word of caution should you pass the chicken ordinance. Oddly enough, we have a resident in Boulder who uses a chicken as a pet. It has a run of the house. I've seen it. So discourage it in your ordinances, but frankly, how many of us want to be walking inside people's houses to see if they're letting the chicken run free? I don't want to be one of those. So, what's being passed around is the Boulder City permit. Has the ordinance summary in the back, and
Something that will come up a little bit later is a collection of our research on different jurisdictions. So this is just to highlight how big the trend is in backyard chickens. So this is backyardchickens.com. I use this little backyardchickens.com. They have a collection of chicken ordinances on here. So this was invaluable when I was doing my research for what our ordinance was going to look like. But they have everything you need to help you raise chickens. There's a forum, there's message boards, there's architectural plans for coops. The amazing thing, so this is kind of some of their facts and figures. There's almost 500,000 people that are members of backyardchickens.com. 1 million posts, 1 million threads so far, and it's just off it, but there's 17 million total posts on the website. So, I mean, that's insane. So again, this is something that we need to be considering, whether it's now or a couple months from now, a couple years from now. This is not going away. People want chickens. So, and what's being handed out now is kind of the culmination of this research. This is what we found a typical chicken ordinance nationwide looks like. We looked up about 22 cities, talked to a lot of them. Some of them just came from backyardchickens.com, but the average was that they allowed between 4 and 15 hens. Some of them had no limits, but it was usually in more rural areas. And most of this discussion is, at least from my speaking points, suburb chickens. I learned that there's a lot of discussion about this, but 7 hens is the minimum ideal because there's in a coop there's a pecking order, and each chicken has its role. There's sentinels, there's communicators. I mean, they all have roles, and so 7 hens is like the minimum to get all those roles. Almost nobody allows roosters. Again, maybe the more rural areas would. because they're just noisy and they're a little more animated. Aggressive. Lot sizes as small as 3,800 square feet. That's actually Grand Rapids, Michigan, of all places. So this is very popular. And most places did not allow them in multifamily. It was always single-family detached homes, and always in backyards or side yards, never in front yards, and coop requirements. And one thing that we noticed that there was not necessarily consensus on, but was whether or not to require permits for raising chickens. And you'll see that Boulder City and Henderson went opposite in this, but and whether or not to require neighbor consent. And we saw about 41% required permits and only 15% required neighbor consent.
Now, Boulder City staff recommended permits because it does take staff time to enter the information in, go out, do an inspection, verify the chicken coop is really so many feet away from the property line from other houses. Our city council decided we want to make this as painless as possible for the residents, so it's a free permit. And we literally gave out 5 chicken permits as Christmas gifts. On Christmas Eve, we had 5 people came in who said they wanted to give their significant other a chicken keeping permit for Christmas because they knew it was free. How many have heard a rooster crow when you're sound asleep in bed, wishing you still had 2 more hours? All the time. We prohibit roosters in Boulder and Henderson. We also prohibit slaughter. And for those of you who have never seen a chicken have its head cut off, it really does run around without its head, and blood spurts out while it runs. My dad did that to our rooster that we really didn't like, and then we ate him, and he was really good. You can't breed chicks for sale. Can't sell eggs on site. Important to note that most CCNRs or HOAs do prohibit chickens. So the city ordinance may say you can do it. It's up to the homeowner to decide whether or not he wants to fight his HOA. We let them know we won't get in the fight. That's between them and them. I'm sure you've all had people come and complain that so-and-so is doing something to violate the CCNRs. And they want the city to do something about it. You gladly have to tell them, go call the lawyer of your choice and leave us alone.
So, of course, when I started writing this chicken ordinance, I was actually, some of my coworkers up here, they might remember, I did not want to write this ordinance. I felt like, I didn't go to school, I didn't learn about chickens, I didn't learn about animals. But I did learn, I grew to love them, and I had learned a lot about chickens. So I've learned a lot about, even though I've written myself out of, my own lot is too small, so I can't have chickens, but I feel like I would know what I was doing if I had chickens. So you probably should have a coop. And out here especially, and probably everywhere, it should be predator proof. And if your coop isn't predator proof, you'll learn why out here. And most people, they want chickens for eggs, and they'll know all about the importance of the coop because you don't get eggs if you don't have chickens. If you don't have a coop, you're not going to have chickens.
You also have chickens, yeah.
Right.
Like I said, you won't get eggs if you don't have chickens.
Yes.
Or good.
Or good.
They didn't catch
All right. We're going to do this all night. So the coop is where they actually lay the eggs. And then there's what's called a run. And if we go to the next slide, you can see. So that's the coop. We can talk about it, right?
Can you hear us when we talk about it?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So that's the coop, and that's kind of where they get out of the elements, and that's a run. And there's some of the ordinances had prescribed square footage, like 4 square feet per chicken for the coop and 10 square feet per chicken for the run. We didn't go as far as really regulating that. Just some different designs of coops. You'll see similarities. There's where they sleep and where they lay eggs. And here's their run. You know that something is commonplace if it's at Costco. And you can buy a coop at Costco. And it's actually not, I mean, $220, it's not that bad. I mean,
This is I mean, if you look at the picture carefully, it has a cantilevered coop. My kids don't even have a bedroom this nice.
So, and, yeah, so, as with anything that we regulate, there will be complaints and there's potential issues. Rooster noise, as Brock mentioned, they're loud, and so it's very common that you can't have roosters. If you buy chicks, you don't always know if they're hens or roosters, so it just may happen that once they get older, one or two are going to be roosters, and so you'll just kind of have to deal with that, whether you give them away or take them to a butcher, whatever. But the jurisdictions I called and asked, rarely did they say they had complaints about hen noise. And have any of you heard anything in the last 5 minutes, like as you've been sitting there? Even kids are loud at chickens. There's chickens in the room with us. They're just not that quiet, but somehow we've gotten complaints about hen noise, and it's kind of just not a thing. Another potential issue is sanitation, because they're animals, and obviously animals make sounds. But any homeowner that has a pet is already required by most ordinances to maintain their yards, maintain their pet waste.
This is Jenna Irwin. She used to work for me until that little one came along. But she was kind enough to bring some chickens so you could see them. I'm sure you've all seen a chicken once in your life, but as she demonstrated so carefully, they don't make a lot of noise. Earlier we had a slide about the importance of making a coop predator-proof. People don't realize what the range is for coyotes in the Las Vegas area. In Boulder City, the entire city, coyotes roam the streets. More often than not, if I get out of a city council meeting at 9 in the evening, I'll go out in the parking lot and there's a pack of coyotes just trotting down the street. Sadly, they discovered the hard way, and they live right literally in the middle of town, that coyotes can even get into all sorts of devices. So these are replacement chickens. Yeah, they're trying to be cute. They're not cute. But she's here to answer any questions you might have at the end. Little joke I like to crack is chickens are the only animal that can say my name. All
right, so anyways, I had done, and I've got 2 videos to show after this. They're already demonstrating pretty well, but I have a couple videos to show. But I actually got some very dramatic, I didn't get it, the mayor and council got it, but I was mentioning some hate mail from a Henderson resident about their neighbor's one hen and how loud it was, and it was embarrassing, and
So much for that.
that's just not going to work. But and luckily, almost probably 4 out of our 5 council members had chickens growing up, so they knew that they're not loud. And these people were just adamant that the hen next door to them was ruining their lives because it was so loud. So be prepared for the complaint, but it's not a valid complaint. Yeah. So my niece took this video for me. Sorry, it's sideways. Yeah, we'll replay it. At the beginning is behind their house, it's maybe 75 feet away, is a chicken coop. And you can hear the chickens. And then right next door to the chicken coop is the dog. So, yeah,
Which is louder, chicken or the dog?
we don't, and obviously we have dog laws and barking laws, and animal control will respond if there's a loud dog, but it's clearly chickens are not an issue compared to the noise that dogs make. And that kept coming back in our minds at Henderson as we were trying to decide what regulations we wanted to enact. Would we do this for a dog? Would we do this for someone who had cats?
So in Boulder, we set to adopt something in the middle of the road, a maximum number of 10 hens, no roosters. Often when you get chicks that are little, you don't, like you said, you don't know if they're roosters or not until they get older. We typically give people 7 days to get rid of the rooster once they figure out that they get a rooster. They always ask us, oh, how do I get rid of the rooster? And I'll tell you, it's really hard not to tell them to chop off the head and eat it. We just don't offer a suggestion, we let them figure it out for themselves. We require the coop to be in the backyard, not in the side yard, for several reasons. Most side yards, much like there in the rest of the valley, they aren't very big. And you want to have adequate space for the chicken, but you also want to have some space between the chicken coop and the neighboring homes, so they're not too close. They can only be used for personal use. They can't be breeding them to sell off pairs or broods to other people. They can't be selling eggs. Because I had to tell my wife the other day that she's not allowed to buy eggs from one of her friends. Apparently someone we know has chickens and is selling eggs, so I need to go have a little chat with her too. They have to be kept in a coop. And if you don't, you find out the hard way why. Coops need to be set back at least 5 feet from all property lines, and we only allow them in our R1 zones. It's a one-time permit. Since there's no renewal fee, they apply for the permit. We go out and do a brief inspection to make sure the coop is 5 foot from property line, and they're on their merry way to raise chickens unless we get a complaint. The ordinance does allow us to go in the backyard to verify. We have yet to go back a second time. It's a chicken coop.
And Henderson's ordinance, we did look at Boulder cities. Again, where we went kind of opposite of them is the requiring of a permit or of neighbor consent. But we allow up to 7 hens. Again, for that kind of that minimum pecking order, down to a 6,000 square foot lot size. In any residential district, I don't know that we have that many houses, single-family detached houses in our multi-family residential districts, but it's possible. So we went with all of our low and medium density residential districts. But your lot has to be 6,000 square feet, and it has to be a single-family detached. We also require a coop and a run, but we don't regulate the size. Because anything you regulate, and this will come up in a couple slides later, you're going to have to enforce. And we'll come deal with that in a couple slides. The coop has to be 5 feet from any of your property lines and 20 feet from any of your neighboring homes. It doesn't have to be 5 feet from your house, but it has to be 5 feet from one of your neighbor's houses. 20 feet, sorry. No permit, no neighbor consent, and the reason we went with that is we wanted some regulations on paper that we could point to and that were helpful to people. We didn't want to, we're bigger than Boulder City. We didn't want the bureaucracy of having to issue the permits and having to follow up on them and all that. Also, we don't allow them in the front yards, we allow them in the side yard, but no front yards, and no slaughter or breeding for sale. And when we say no slaughter, yeah, if you've got a rooster that you didn't know about, no one's gonna stop you slaughtering it. The point is you're not raising chickens for slaughter. And just a kind of a fact that we gave to our council people is the 6,000 square foot minimum qualifies about 44% of all Henderson households to own chickens. That's not taking into account CCNRs or HOA regulations. Just a summary of the local ordinances around the valley. Las Vegas, no, unless I just didn't. Unless I didn't read it right, but I thought we talked about it. And county did kind of differentiate between the Las Vegas Valley and all the outlying areas. So these standards, I'm pretty sure they're the Las Vegas Valley regulations. And then we want to talk about how we're doing now that our ordinances are enacted.
We've issued roughly a dozen. In fact, we just issued one last week. We haven't had any complaints. The person who came in last week for a permit, because we had a complaint that he had chickens without a permit, all the neighbor wanted him to do was get a permit. She thought the chickens were great. Didn't have any complaint about the sound. She and the neighbor just had other issues. But so far, those who have permits, we haven't had issues. Every now and then, someone will complain about a rooster. We'll ask, well, where does the rooster live? And they don't know. They just know what wakes them up at 5 in the morning. Doesn't do us any good, but we typically get the rooster complaints, but they never know where the roosters live. Our typical violations, they just don't have a permit, or where they place the coop, being adjacent to a property line. We'll have them shifted so it's away from the property line or out of the side yard, and then they're good to go. But overall, it's been a good experience. We suspect that there's more out there who don't have permits, that can get them, but no one complains. We don't know they're there. Just like if someone builds a fence too tall in the backyard, until someone complains, you don't know it's there.
And the way we enforce the chicken ordinance in Henderson, it's done by community development and code enforcement. Animal control didn't want anything to do with it. So all this information I got from our code enforcement division. But with animal control, if there's something, if the chickens are in danger, like if they're not being kept safely, they will step in. If there's a rooster, animal control will respond. But all other, like noise or sanitation, any of those, it's going to be community development, investigating, and code enforcement responding. So some of the complaints that, in our chicken ordinance is only a few months old, and people are just starting to catch on that they're allowed to have chickens now in the suburbs. So probably not too widespread yet. But the complaints that we're getting, or the responses that code enforcement, the issues code enforcement is responding to, are chickens running free. This is a dual issue, because so residents are complaining about their neighbors' chickens running free, and then the chicken owners are complaining about them wanting their chickens to be able to run free. I believe that the woman that I went and met in Boulder City when I was researching the ordinance, they only let their chickens run free when they're in the backyard. And so predators are not just coyotes at night. It's your neighbor's cat or your neighbor's dog. So even just you let them out while you're inside doing whatever you're doing, your neighbor's cat could hop the fence and get your chicken. So this is where we say you're going to find out the hard way letting your chickens run free. It really is for your own good. But because we have a regulation that says you have to have a coop, now that the residents complaining about their neighbors are pointing to our ordinance, look, they got to keep them in the coop. So again, what you regulate, you have to enforce. Placement of the coop is a common complaint so far. The setbacks from the property line or the setbacks from the neighboring house usually, and just the number of chickens in the backyard. I know we had, right before we adopted our chicken ordinance, we had one case where I think someone in the suburbs had 20 chickens. So we're like, well, as of now, they're grandfathered, but once they're dead, that's it. I'm still not quite sure what their actual complaint is. The hate mail that I mentioned that we got, I actually met the people. They were in our lobby, kind of yelling at me about how are you going to allow chickens? I gotta believe there was some feud between neighbors, and I think that's where a lot of the complaints come. Is they've already got a beef with their neighbor, and now they're going to complain about their chickens because they're an easy target. One of the complaints we got was that they had flies in their backyard, and they were blaming the single hen next door on the flies. There's no way. So there's of course there's that to deal with. I don't know what their actual concerns are. Did you want to?
On the fly issue, if we go back to where I talked about how chicken manure is hot for fertilizer, flies don't like it either. So someone calls and complains that the chickens next door are creating all sorts of flies. There's probably other code enforcement issues. The chickens just happen to be there. It's been the case here. As far as the chickens running free, depending on how close you are to the edge of the community, kind of takes care of itself. Sadly, growing up, we lost chickens when we let them run free in the backyard. Lost ducks, good riddance. Ducks are mean. sure. Duck lover, then I'm still gonna say ducks are meat. But we haven't had any chickens running free complaints in Boulder. We do know that in our horse corral area, there are chickens that run free. Not very long. That's right out in the desert, but it happens. But it really hasn't been an issue for us. See if Jenna would be willing to come back up, and you can even bring your kids to see if they want to answer questions about the chickens. You want to come up, Kelly? You want to tell us a little bit about your chickens?
Well, they're new.
So when you got them, what color were they?
They were, well, we just got these the two brown ones. We got them about a week and a half ago. So they kind of look that way, but she was black. And we have a couple other ones that were white, or were yellow, they're white now. Some are yellow, some are black.
Do you ever get complaints from your neighbors?
No, actually our neighbor didn't even know. He thought that the coop was a playhouse. He didn't know. He's like, you guys have chickens? We're like, yeah, just let us know if they ever get too loud.
Did you buy your coop at Costco?
No. We built it. No, but you can.
Are they laying eggs yet?
No, they're only about, they're almost 2 months old. So they started about 4 months. And like you said though, we do have one that we think might be a rooster. He's not very nice and he will go.
Chicken fricassee pretty soon.
Yeah, but yeah, he attacks the new ones. But you don't know that. Like you buy the chicks and they told us they were hens and we think that he's a rooster. But you don't know until they start crowing. I mean, he looks like one, but some hens look like roosters and they're not roosters, so.
I'll ask you a question that was actually asked at one of our city council meetings. And so you can let them know what the answer is. Do you have to have a rooster to have eggs?
No. No. We asked that question.
We had some residents who were convinced that hens won't lay eggs unless there's a rooster. Apparently they didn't pass biology.
I didn't know that at first.
You don't know anything about yeah, exactly.
They'll just lay eggs left and right.
The eggs won't hatch without a
That's
rooster.
right.
So their predecessors, how many eggs a week did they lay?
Well, we had 6, but one was an old lady, and so she didn't lay, you know, she had stopped laying a couple years before. She was like 7, and they don't have a very long lifespan. So we just wanted her to live out her days in a nicer place than down at the corrals in the dirt. So she didn't lay, but we have 6 or 7, and we got about 4 or 5 eggs a day. It was almost too much, so that's why this time we only wanted like 4. I mean, after a while, so many all our family members have chickens, so there's only so much giving away you can do before everybody's eggs out. So 4 should be good. We should have 4.
Anyone have any questions? Over here.
What is the specific wording you have to use so you don't get peacocks, gooses, and ducks?
We used the word chicken. I mean, our use classification in the code is backyard chickens. I think once it was about to go to city council, we're like, well, should we allow ducks and other types of fowl? But that's not the trend, only ducks. So yeah, ours specifically says chicken, and I think we might have even defined chicken.
Are other fowls part of the trend? that you
None.
see?
One of my neighbors sounds like they have a goose, but I don't know why they have a goose. But no, chickens is the trend as far as I know.
We use the word chicken can in our ordinance to narrow it down.
Yeah, and it's good to narrow it down. Washoe County, it's not that it's unregulated, you just didn't read far enough. We actually regulate fowl, and that ordinance actually came in the early 90s, so it's not the trend. It's been around for quite a while. We did that specifically because there's people who have ducks and geese and guinea hens. We run into all of those, but then we started to get bird creep. So you want to make sure that there's a provision in your code because you end up with an emu in the backyard. And the question is an emu a fowl? And the answer is no, it's not. But what we had to do was go back to the scientific classification under Webster's dictionary. What do you call a fowl? How does Webster's define a fowl? And how does that look for the scientific classification of an emu and an ostrich? Turns out, thankfully, that they're not the same, and so we had the person get rid of the emu. But if we had been too broad in our definition, then they would have said, nope, that is a generic enough term that covers an emu, and then we would have been out of luck.
It's funny, Henderson actually has an emu ordinance already. So there's an and an alpaca ordinance. So yeah, we nitpick the specific types of animals. We're very specific. And it's usually because someone has moved to Henderson, moved to the city, and they already have one, and calls the council and wants to keep it, and we're like, yeah, that's fine. But yeah, so we did specify chicken hens with this ordinance.
I saw a lot of hands go up, so were there other questions? Or we answered them all already?
Was there a specific reason why you guys wrote it so people couldn't sell the eggs to someone else?
That's, the health district, I think you have to get a special permit from them to make sure that, they're not gonna be salmonella carrying bombs.
Yeah, and I think technically in Henderson, you could take them to a farmer's market. It's the whole idea that it's meant to be a very suburban thing. It's meant to be that you're not trying to, we're trying to protect the neighborhoods, obviously, and not allow basically a farm in the middle of the suburbs. So we want to accommodate people owning chickens and having eggs, but also kind of try to not increase the traffic. People come in, it probably wouldn't be that much, but I think you could probably take them. You just can't sell them out of your house. We haven't had it come up yet, so I'm sure once we get a complaint that someone is selling chickens at a farmer's market, we'll have to deal with it.
And by not allowing them to sell, it stops the ordinance creep. If that makes sense. Or, okay, I got 10 and I can sell so many eggs a week. I want to be able to sell more eggs. So they'll try to get allowances in the ordinance, and eventually, like it says, suddenly every other house is a little farmette. And we're really not.
Lisa?
Well, because urban agriculture is really growing, do you think you'll keep looking at things on a case-by-case basis? The next one, maybe is bees?
We're actually looking at bees. The same person who wanted the chickens, she wants bees.
Well, I think that's sort of, you have to assume people are trying to be more sustainable and reducing the travel distance it takes to get food and all the sustainability issues that go along with the way we do things. So is there a way to look at a more holistic approach to urban ag?
I'm sure there is. I know I would refer back to San Diego's report because they have an urban agricultural ordinance. Theirs included goats, and I mean, it was pretty broad. And of course, they're much bigger than us, and they probably have some rural outlying areas that they deal with too. But yeah, we're looking at bees right now. But yeah, it's still case by case for us. But I mean, we're probably going to get out in front of it. I would imagine out of the Henderson strong. So yeah, we could definitely be looking for other ways to be not just on this suburban chickens trend, but the suburban agriculture trend.
Do you have any questions?
So I guess I don't see the issue, like from a health district point of view you mentioned, between giving eggs away or selling them. And in the community I live in, they're very creative. They would probably just, for a donation, you can have a dozen eggs or so. So I guess I just don't, and like your sustainability issue, getting food to the people in the neighborhoods, what's the harm in somebody making a few extra bucks? I mean, there's going to be a point when, yeah, it's full-blown commercial, industrial operation and doesn't fit the backyard chicken, but as a 4-H project, woohoo, go.
It only takes one bad egg. That's our job as government. Sadly, we have to look out for that one instance where something bad might happen. OSHA wouldn't exist if someone was so stupid as to try to blow dry their hair beside the shower. If you ever read the little stickers on the handheld dryers, that say do not use in showers. When you think of all the instances OSHA has regulated something, because someone was dumb enough to do it. You have to look out for the lowest common denominator. And inevitably, there's going to be someone who raises chickens who doesn't care for the eggs properly, and someone may buy one of the eggs, or they may get it for free, and then they end up dying. I'd rather be in someone else's watch and not on mine. I'd rather not happen at all, but
Do you have a home business ordinance?
we do.
What would prevent someone from applying for a home business? And
I think it's
do
already
you
prohibited.
specifically exclude this from home business?
Well, if they were selling off-site, they could probably, in theory, in Henderson, they could get a home occupation permit. I think once they start trying to get their business license paperwork lined up, that's probably where they're gonna have to deal with the health district. And so maybe that will shed light on, because I don't know. I haven't called health. I don't know what the health district has to say about this. I assume that's when we'll find out.
We just wouldn't issue the home license if they wanted to sell eggs or raise chickens.
Okay.
Any more questions? Anyone want a picture with the chicken?
Just kind of curious, 2 sessions ago, the legislature passed the cottage food industry legislation, and the session after that did some updating. I don't know if you could shed some light on the relationship between, supporting, this type of agricultural activity as it relates to promoting kind of that cottage food industry, the whole locally produced, locally consumed food community.
If I remember right, the cottage food, we paid close attention to that. That was more about preparing foods in your home and then selling them, jams, popcorn, what have you. And it didn't really deal with eggs or farm produce.
Perhaps maybe what you might be referring to is pasteurized versus unpasteurized milk. We've had some inquiries about milk being sold from cows, and I think Jared, I don't know if you know this, but like in the county, like out in Moapa Valley, there are some people that were selling milk out there that hadn't been inspected or anything like that. So that might have been the push for getting that kind of food out there. I don't know if it was necessarily cottage industry but I think that the intent was, or the spirit of it was, having semi-urban or rural agriculture serving a community and having people being able to access it.
I can't speak to that. I quite honestly know what you're talking about. No offense, but in none of my research did I see any of the other jurisdictions that allow the backyard chickens. There was nothing about anything like that. There was nothing even about health districts. I mean, some cities allowed you to sell them, and some didn't. Almost none of them let you sell them out of your home. But yeah, I don't know. And I don't know what the difference between growing vegetables in your backyard and taking them to a farmer's market versus having eggs out of your backyard and taking them to a farmer's market. I'm not sure. I know you're not making a killing by growing vegetables in your backyard, but it's a very similar concept.
Ever got rich on zucchini?
No, I fried my cucumbers. Preferably.
The chickens make noise. Char doesn't.
They don't make much noise.
Just if you let chickens loose in a garden, that green stuff looks really tasty to them.
And yeah,
Have you found them to be an attractive nuisance for coyotes and other predators?
We've had people try to claim that would happen, but these are people who didn't realize that coyotes already went down the middle of the street every night. They assumed that because a neighbor got chickens, that suddenly their neighborhood's going to be infested with large amounts of coyotes, not realizing that coyotes are going up and down the street every night. True story, Christmas Eve 6 years ago, the next door neighbor had a little yapper dog. He's up in the back, yapping.
Didn't have one the next day, right?
And when I was in my front room putting together a bicycle for my son, the dog made a loud scream. A few minutes later, I happened to look out the front window. trotting down the road, little yapper dog in the coyote's mouth. So for people to think that chickens are going to create a public nuisance, it's a false narrative. They just don't understand their own community. I'd be willing to bet that they probably extend several miles here in Las Vegas from the desert area into the community. I doubt you see one on the strip, but maybe you would. I don't know. I haven't walked the strip for
Well, that was one of my concerns at first too, that it was going to draw the coyotes even deeper into the suburbs. And so I asked our animal control. They mulled it over for a couple of days, and they didn't think so. They're like, no, they're out. They know the cats are there. They know the dogs are there. And I just don't know that it's ever going to get to a point where there's that many chickens. Not that many houses with chickens.
Coyote sighting near Charleston and Rancho,
That
coming
far in?
down Mason in front of my house.
That's a ways in. Do they sleep in the spring
Far in,
reserve
it's
or
going back out.
one on the back?
I work in an area where there's a lot of chickens and there's a lot of roosters being raised to fight. So, there's that fine balance of like wanting to allow chickens for those who want to raise their backyard chickens, but then you don't want to permit something you can't regulate. I was just wondering if you guys had come across any of that in your research or any work that you've been doing.
Is it against the law in Nevada or talk about?
Of course it is.
It's probably everywhere.
Just
We have not
stop
come across
them from
that.
doing it.
In fact, I've not heard of any cases.
Okay.
And it's usually, we get a complaint about a rooster and animal control goes out and says, they must all end up on someone's plate. But, yeah.
In San Diego, they were really worried about like the runoff from the chicken waste. Are you guys at all worried about that, or are you just expecting the dark with chickens?
Again, we already have a property maintenance code, so you always have to keep your property free of debris and litter and all that stuff. And what I kept reminding myself of writing these regulations, and when we were determining which ones to enact, is there concern about, there is concern about dog waste runoff and other animals, but, that's what I keep reminding myself. Do we have the same concern about dogs? And do we have the same concern about cats and other pets? There's just not that many chickens. At least not in Henderson and some of these suburbs that are enacted. But no, we did not consider that. So that might be something that we have to deal with.
It's also been our general experience that if they're a good steward for the chickens, they keep everything nice and clean. So who wants to harvest eggs from a pile of chicken manure? There's always a few bad actors out there. That's why we have these ordinances, generally speaking. But for the most part, those who want to have chickens take care of them properly, and manure is not an issue. And if you've been around manure, it's kind of self-policing. You clean that up pretty quick, whether it's dog, cat, chicken.
Sure, but shouldn't some of it get water supply? That was making debris out of San Diego getting into the oceans.
Not an issue for Boulder since our water doesn't return to the lake.
I'll have to check their report again and see what their concern was. Because, so it would have to go from people's backyards through their side yards and then into the streets, I guess. I don't know. Like with dogs, you're walking down the sidewalk, and so literally their waste is just closer to the curb and the gutter. The chickens, I don't know. But it's a good point. We haven't caught it.
And it doesn't rain here very often either.
Well, so, and we'll still take more questions. I realized we have one more slide. So, like I said, beware of over-regulating, because what you regulate, you're going to have to enforce. And I'm already getting suggestions from our code enforcement division that some of the regulations maybe aren't working. I think it's too soon to tell, but we'll definitely be keeping an eye out. Some of these things regulate themselves, like the requirement for a coop. So far, all that we're finding with that requirement is that the neighbors of chicken owners are pointing to it. They don't have their coops that far away.
So, again, if we relax the requirement for a coop, some people will probably try to get away with it without having a coop, but again, if they're keeping chickens because they want chickens, they're gonna buy a coop at some point. And then determine if you have actual problems with chickens and regulate that. If you're regulating noise and regulating, setbacks and all that stuff, is it even a problem that you need to regulate? As opposed to just, again, because dogs aren't, I think you've got to get a license for dogs, but that's kind of it. There's nothing you really have to do to own pets. So I'm not sure chickens are all that different. That's all we've got. Any other questions, any comments?